Marianne, I'm so happy that you're here.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
It is an honor to have you back on the show, but it's our first time meeting in person, which is so exciting to me because I've been such a fan of yours for as long as I can remember.
Oh, thank you.
All of your books, all of your spiritual teachings, you really paved the path for everything that I'm interested in and everything that I do now with this podcast and beyond.
Well, that makes me very, very happy. And I'm sure you're paving the path for people after you.
I hope so. Yeah.
One long continuous
You're passing the baton and you're doing so many exciting things now that I can't wait to get into. But before we do, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience, tell them a little bit about your background, your spiritual work, and where you came from.
Well, I come from Houston, Texas. And back in the 1970s, I started reading a book called A Course in Miracles, which probably a lot of people who are watching your podcast know about. And I started giving lectures. And at that time, it was before there was a career niche like there is today of women particularly standing up in a kind of non-denominational context, talking about spirituality, personal growth, and so forth. So I had no reason to think that it would lead to anything other than just more joy in doing it. I was here in Los Angeles. I was a temporary secretary. I was a waitress. I didn't know what I was going to do beyond that to earn money, but I just knew that talking about the Course in Miracles was what brought me joy. Then, however, the AIDS crisis burst onto the scene, and in a very real way, gay men in Los Angeles gave me my career, because all of a sudden my lectures were very filled, because this was such a time of crisis, and there was this then young woman, I was 31 years old, talking about a God who loves you no matter what, and how when we love each other, miracles happen. And then this just became a full-time thing. And then 5 years after that, and I know probably some of the people who are watching come from Los Angeles. We founded out of that Project Angel Food, which still exists today, in order to feed homebound people with AIDS. And we did a lot of work, those of us who were at the lectures, a lot of work around being of service to people who were going through that, because it was a very intense experience for the city and for the country and for the world. And then 5 years after that, I got a book contract to write a book based on the lectures I had been giving. And then in 1992, the book came out, and it's called A Return to Love.
Best book ever. I'm sure so many people listening have read this book. It's been a life changer for so many of us.
Thank you for saying that. And to my great good fortune, Oprah Winfrey said the same thing.
Yes.
It's really younger people today can't appreciate what that meant in those days, that Oprah liked your book.
Oh, yeah, it's huge.
And so that gave me really a national and an international audience and career. And that has been a very meaningful career for me. Back in 2014, I decided I wanted to run for Congress, because I began to recognize that even though we can work on our personal lives and transform, which is really the center of it all, and even though I could found nonprofits and raise charitable contributions and help people, I began to see in my travels around the country that there was a kind of ubiquitous level of despair that no amount of charity could fix, no amount of private charity could compensate for, because it had to do with how the society had come to operate. That there are too many people living in invisible places in this country who are locked out, who don't have hope of ever being in this room. And they're locked out before they're 10 years old. 80%, I'll give you an example. 80% of the families whose children go to public school in Los Angeles live beneath the poverty line.
Wow.
I know, it's stunning. And in many of the schools that they attend, they don't even have the resources to teach a child to read. And if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. You know, the other night, and this might be something that you would like to do, Jordan, I'd love to connect you to the woman. There is a very, very old traditional organization called the Union Rescue Mission down in Skid Row.
Mm-hmm.
And it's run by interns, by volunteers, and they have this thing called Mondays at the Mission. And the kids who are between 12 and 18, every Monday, they like people to come talk to the kids who are doing something interesting, sharing information. I think you'd actually be perfect.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds so special.
Now, these kids were great. I mean, they're just like kids anywhere else. And it had a very clean energy, actually, because there's such a no drugs, no alcohol rule at the mission. Many of these children had actually walked here from Latin America.
Wow.
Had walked here. There's a place in southern Mexico called the Darien Gap, which is one of the most inhospitable landscapes on the planet. So think how awful your life has to be due to the drug cartels mainly and the economic devastation in those countries, but mainly the violence. Think how terrible life has to be that you were willing to walk with small children to get here, to be at some place like the Union Rescue Mission on Skid Row, and still that is preferable to where you were.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And because of our policies, people are forced into the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talk about undocumented. The people who are undocumented don't want to be undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
But in too many cases, in order to become documented, they have to risk deportation and all kinds of it's terrible the trauma these people are put through on top of just the hardship. So for me, I was so struck, though, and I hope you will go there, because these kids they have the same dreams, same ability. You know, I remember many years ago, there was a woman I knew, and she was, at that time, she has since passed, she was the Supreme Court Justice in Oklahoma, but she was also she was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Oklahoma, and she was also a very religious Christian Scientist. And so she liked my work. In fact, she was a real mentor to me in terms of putting the two together.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked me if I would come out there. My first book had come out, so I think she knew I'd been commercially successful. She was asking for money, which I was glad to give when I had it at that time. And there's this thing called adjudicated kids. They had been considered bad kids at school. And if somebody didn't rescue them right then, they would, statistically, there was a great probability they would end up in jail. Now, remember, when I was in college, there were 300,000 people in prison in the United States. Today, there are 2.3 million. So she asked me to come out there. And I remember sitting in a circle with these kids. And I started by asking them what their dreams were. Their dreams weren't any different than kids who go to Westlake. Their dreams weren't any different than any kids that you know.
Mm-hmm.
Another situation that really impacted me once, I was at a school in inner city Detroit. Deeply disadvantaged financially. And I did the same thing. What are your dreams? And I was struck by how many of the kids, when I said, what do you want to be when you're an adult? How many of them said, I want to be a pediatric cardiologist.
Wow.
Now, some pediatric cardiologists must have come and spoken to their class, right?
Yeah.
But when I asked a friend later, why do you think they all want to be pediatric cardiologists? He said, because they were told that that's the doctor who fixes a child's broken heart.
Oh my gosh.
And then I did this. I put the boys on one side and the girls on the other. And I said, okay, this is the dream. I mean, this is what we're going to do. Girls, and we're going to do it, and the girls, and we're going to do it, the boys. Say what you want to do with your life. You're a girl, and you're going to say what you're doing in your life. And then one of the boys has to tell you that he has confidence that you can do it. So one girl says something like, I want to be an editor at a fashion magazine. Okay, Devin, tell her. Well, I think, I think you can do it. I said to the girl, I said, did he convince you? Well, I mean, it wasn't exactly inspiring. Devin, keep talking. And we get into the point where he said, you can do it. You've got it in you. You've got the potential.
Aww.
And then the same thing with asking the guys. So I just see so many people in this country, or I have seen so many people whose dreams are shackled, who live in, not all prison walls are visible.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And so I realize how much poverty is at the bottom of so much of that.
Mm-hmm.
Bad public policy is at the bottom of all that. And I would find myself counseling, coaching, in certain cases, politicians. And I would see, first of all, how many people are emotionally buffered against the realities that I'm talking about, which is the majority of people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the realities affect the majority of people. But the other thing is I saw how our political system operates in such a way that even when people have the best of intentions, a lot of the circumstances I just described to you are pretty much locked in. Now, if you're among 20% of the people in this country who are financially advantaged enough, I would think it's reasonable to assume everybody in this room has hope.
Yes.
And, man, anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a beautiful
Absolutely.
thing. But I think even we can at times underestimate the chains that bind so many people.
Mm-hmm.
We have achieved a point in this country where if you're brilliant enough, if you're beautiful enough, if you're talented enough, no matter who you are and what neighborhood, you can make it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough. You shouldn't have to be super talented. You shouldn't have to be super beautiful. You shouldn't have to be super genius or brilliant to be able to have a decent life.
I completely agree with you. Wow. So really seeing what was going on in the world and the reality of what was going on in the world inspired you to take your spiritual teaching kind of life that you've had and turn it into really giving a spiritual intervention to the world, like in a more political sense.
That's exactly how I see it. I don't see it as any different. There are times because all that a country is a group of people.
Yeah.
And there are times in life where you have to look in the mirror and say, I got to start over. And this is one of those times for America, we got to start over. We've got to put it all on the table. And we need somebody who helps us do that.
Yeah. Well, so to let all of our listeners know, because you mentioned you're running for Congress back in 2014. Now here we are in 2023, and you're going to be running for president in 2020. You are running for president for 2024, yep. And that's a huge deal. You are the first. I mean, you've been on this podcast once before, but you're still the first and only presidential candidate that we've ever had on the Balance Blonde show.
Well, how cool is that?
It's extremely cool. I mean, it's an honor to even be among you and to be learning from you. To run for president is huge.
I think it's a good thing, though, because we have developed this myth that some people are into politics.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of us say, well, I'm not into politics. But there's an old French saying, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. I've been saying to people in the personal growth, higher consciousness community for years, good luck with all that green juice. Mm-hmm. Because they're poisoning the water, and they're poisoning the air,
yep.
And they're poisoning all the food. You can't, we're getting to the point where there is no amount of money that can buffer you from some of the poisonous and toxic elements that are assaulting us on any given day.
Yeah.
And I know you're a mother, and you think about those things.
I do.
I was looking the other day at an article about what's in a ketchup bottle in Canada versus the ingredients of a ketchup bottle in the United States. There are ingredients in the United States, ketchup that Canada doesn't even allow.
Oh my gosh. I
Other
mean, I'm not
advanced-
surprised.
Not at all. No, nobody's. This stuff has become normalized.
Yeah. I've had so many issues with my health. I've had chronic Lyme disease. I was living in a toxic mold environment.
Oh my God.
So my listeners know, but the last 8 years of my life have been a healing journey and an awakening to what's really going on. I mean, why is it so hard to be healthy? Why is it so hard to even get my hands on food that's actually nutritious? And like you're saying, with the water and the soil, there's a whole thing going on, and it's scary.
It is scary. It is scary, and it's time to do something about it. And it's what you said before, an intervention. We don't have universal health care like they do in every other advanced democracy because of the insurance companies. People are rationing their insulin here because of the pharmaceutical companies. People such as yourself, recognizing as mothers, as people who are trying to be healthy, carcinogens in our food, in our air, in our ground, even because of big chemical companies, big food companies, big agricultural companies. We worry about our children and violence because of the greed of gun manufacturers. We recognize that the habitability of the planet could be in peril over the next few decades because of the greed of big oil. And we realize that we've had some terrible military misadventures that were tragic and even criminal errors because of the greed of the defense manufacturers. And everybody's just kind of like, what do we do? And so we're always playing whack-a-mole. Here somebody's trying to fix it in the area of food, trying to fix it in the area of agriculture, trying to fix it in the area of battered women, trying to fix it in the area of the environment. And what I believe we need to realize is that it's a big matrix of corporate power. It's all of those industries. And they form what is like a corporate aristocracy. And their profits in policy after policy are placed before the health and the safety and the well-being of the American people, of our children, and of our planet. And it is so baked into the system now that is true, that it's not going to change until we stop. But that system will not disrupt itself. We have to disrupt it. We have to stage that intervention.
That's my question then, is how would you change that? How would you begin as president to change that reality? Like the big pharmaceutical companies that are very, very powerful, big food, all of it.
Well, the president sets a moral vision for the country. Former President Franklin Roosevelt said the most important part of the job of the presidency, he said, is not administrative, but a moral vision. The first thing I would do is what I'm doing now, is to name the problem. You have to name the problem. Corporations have gotten control of this country, of the people, by the people, and for the people. That was the vision that Abraham Lincoln gave us in the Gettysburg Address. He said that the men who had died in that battle for the Union had died so that a government of the people and by the people and for the people would not perish from the earth. The first thing we have to do is to admit it's perishing now. We've become a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. It would be very good just to have a president who says that. Okay? And then the president appoints to head agencies. Now, right now, too many of our agencies are run by the people who represent these corporations. So that's the first thing you do, is you appoint a different kind of people. You appoint people who represent the problem solvers rather than the problem generators, because that's what happens in Washington. It's not like we don't have the problem solvers in all the areas that you and I are discussing here today, but they don't have the power.
Yeah.
And too often the people in power don't really want to connect with the people who really solve the problems, because fundamentally solving those problems does not necessarily serve the immediate short-term profit-making interests of those huge industries, which are giving the corporate donations. And that's why with me, I'm not tied to those people. I'm not tied to that system. I just want to go in there one time, sort of do a little chiropractic adjustment on this country. The president does not have a magic wand. And we don't want a president who has a magic wand. So I'm not saying that I go in there and then within 6 weeks we all have universal health care. Within 6 weeks, it's not like that. But the president does have a lot of power to set the agenda. The president has the power to appoint agencies. The president has the power of executive orders. And the president has the power of the bully pulpit. I would be naming the truth. I feel that what I'm doing in this campaign is also what I would do as president, say some things that we all know to be true. It's like I was speaking last night somewhere and really giving some statistics and analysis of what's going on. Then I said, I didn't say anything that everybody here doesn't know. Maybe I give you a few little facts and figures, but we all know this, but it's almost like there's a conspiracy of silence. We are real as individuals in this society. Americans get down, get real. We could go have lunch and we'd probably within 30 minutes be really talking about things that matter.
Yeah.
But when it comes to politics, we've all been trained to go, just talk in slogans and keep it real sixth grade.
Yes,
which is
and
almost,
not tell
right?
the truth.
Exactly. So there is, for instance, I'll give you an example. There was a bill in 1980, and it gives the government what's called marching rights. What does that mean? It means, when you were talking about pharmaceutical companies, a pharmaceutical company that uses even $1 of taxpayer money in order to make a drug, which is almost every drug made. If even $1 is used of taxpayer money, the government has the right to go in and lower the price. But the government too often doesn't do it because they don't want to piss off the pharmaceutical companies. So I would go right in there. So there's nothing, this is why I think it has to be somebody who's not one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really does.
Yeah. I think if anything, these crazy last few years that we've had in the world have showed so many of us, even those of us like myself, I mean, politics has never been my passion, and it was something that I formerly didn't really know much about. And what's the last few years have shown me is how important it is that we're told the truth, that we know what's going on. And basically, I mean, everything you're saying, I think things just have to shift.
And I think that women such as yourself are absolutely pivotal to the shift. First of all, young people, there's something like 37%. We are now at a point where demographically, young people will make a difference way more than ever before, even in this next election. You are now at a stage of your life, you have a child yourself, you've dealt with physical illness yourself, you know the issue of we don't, one of the things that I talked about in the last election, we don't have a sickness care, we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sickness care system. So we have a double whammy. Number one, we need to provide universal health care like every other advanced democracy. Number two, why are there so many more chronic illnesses than in every other advanced democracy? Because of the quality of our food, because of the things that are allowed in, whether it has to do with GMOs or anything else. And you're a mother now. So when you read that PFAS or forever chemicals are in half the water, you start thinking about what am I doing when my little boy is brushing his teeth?
I know.
These are political issues. These are political issues. And electing people who are hip to those issues and willing to use the levers of power to deal with those issues becomes urgent. And at this point, I do think urgent matter is exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely. I know these are the things I think about all the time. The water, I mean, and having a little boy, and he's 18 months now, and just watching.
And the safety of school when he goes to school.
Of course.
And I think that now you would know more about this than I at this point, because you're a younger generation than I. But in the same field of, I've been seeing for decades now this sort of white bread, apolitical, almost seduced by capitalism a little too much, like, no, we're not going to go there, brand protection stuff. Do you feel that among the younger people, such as yourself, that there's more of an openness and a readiness and a willingness to allow politics in our own consciousness to become another layer of what we think of as a well-lived, meaningful life?
Yeah, I do. I think before the pandemic, maybe not. Maybe things were just going on as they were and as we'd been taught. And I was, still one of those people who was just like, I don't really want to know about politics. The more I know, the more unhappy it makes me, and I don't want to know. But then the pandemic happened, and the last 3.5 years of our lives have been so different. And I've become very, very passionate about so many things. I mean, our basic human rights. And now that I'm a mom, I do think that I'm not alone in that. I mean, I know I'm not alone in that. I think most of our listeners feel that way. And so many people in general. I'm 32. I'll be 33 in October. And I think myself and those younger than me, people are definitely moving in that direction.
You know, I was 31 when I first started lecturing here, and the AIDS crisis hit. So mine was a very similar timeline to yours, starting around the same age and being hit by something very serious right away. It makes you grow up very fast, grow up professionally, grow up in terms of what you're going to put your focus on, and also what you are going to apply the benefits of your platform to. So
yeah,
it's a whole different level of leadership.
It is. And it's also just wanting to serve others. And I think,
which is the same thing.
Well, it's the same thing. Like spirituality is serving others.
And so is leadership.
So is leadership. You're right. And yeah, you're taking it to the whole next level. So I probably should already know this, but who is your vice president that you're running with?
That's not something you would necessarily already know. That's,
okay, good. I was just worried.
The way it works is that I would have to win the nomination first, and then name my vice president. So obviously I don't have anyone yet, but I can tell you it would be someone who does know Washington. So there are some people who would say, oh, Marianne Williamson, you can't have her. She's not qualified. She hasn't served in office before. What they're really saying is that to them, qualified means somebody who is already in their club and knows how to perpetuate and maintain the system as it is. My qualification is that I know something about disrupting that system. The status quo will not disrupt itself. But as president, it would be good to have someone at my side who did know the car mechanics, the political car mechanics. Now, the problem, though, for the nation is not that we don't have enough good political car mechanics. The problem is we're on the wrong road. So I want a good political car mechanic to help me drive the car, but I'm the one that's going to drive it because we're going to turn this thing around when we're in office.
Yes. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. See, these are the things that I didn't previously know about politics, but I'm happy to be learning. And hopefully with me asking questions such as that one, a lot of people listening will be learning too.
You know, Jordan, I've often said that politics is like watching a soap opera. When you first turn it on, you don't know who the characters are, you don't understand the plot, but it's sort of on in the background.
Yeah.
And within a few days, you're looking and going, oh, I get it. She's with him. You just pick it up. And then politics, and there are people who want it to be this way, that you think it's so complicated. It's actually not.
Yeah.
It's corporations run everything.
That's true.
And too many legislators, our Congress has become a system of legalized bribery in many cases. And they do more to serve the short-term profit goals of their donors than the goal of health, safety, and well-being of their constituents. Now, our Declaration of Independence says that governments are instituted to secure our rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then it says that if the government is not doing that job, and you and I would agree that in many ways it's not, that it is the right of the people to alter it or abolish it. And that's why we're here. We need to alter it. Just like the abolitionists did, just like the women's suffragists did, just like the civil rights movement did. There have been times in our history where there were systems of legalized, institutionalized suppression and oppression. And that's what we're talking about now, right? That's what we're talking about now. And our ancestors rose up and rejected that and pushed back, and it's simply our turn now. We need a new beginning. And that's how you and I started this conversation. Sometimes you have to start over in life.
Yeah, a new beginning. I love it. Wow. So I'm curious, what does your daily life look like? What is like a day in the life of Marianne?
Well, I woke up this morning. I had to have a Zoom call with lawyer and publisher. My second was a Zoom call to do a podcast with Fox Media. Now I'm having a podcast with you, and I have another podcast after this. This is an interesting because today it's the more spiritual orientation. My podcast this afternoon is more political orientation. But you know, the two are coming together and interfacing. as we know.
Yes.
After that, I am doing an interview with somebody very interesting named Nancy McLean. And you would probably find this interesting. She wrote a book called Democracy in Chains. And she really traces what happened that things got to where they are. And it was a very well strategized plan backed by billions of dollars to get us to the point where corporate power and the wealth of a very few people would have such dominance at the expense of so many people. And then this evening, talking to a man who does fantastic work, who might work for my campaign.
Wow, that's amazing. So you have a lot of energy. You have
Well,
a
you
lot
have
of
to have a
like
lot of energy, too.
self-generated
You have a little
energy.
3-year-old. You said a
Yeah,
3-year-old?
he's a year and a half,
Well,
and
a year and
I
a half,
do
a little boy.
have
You have a lot on your plate, too.
Yeah, he's very active, very wild, all over the place. It's so much fun. I love that. And what would a day in your downtime look like? What would you like to do with your free time if you had a day just totally off of work and all of these interviews and all of that?
Like schlumpy clothes, no makeup, nothing I have to do, total brain rest. If I want to watch something light and stupid on TV, I can. Just truly every aspect of my being taking a rest.
Yeah. I hope that you do that every
you.
so often because
So
it's
often
very
you need to.
necessary.
Yeah.
Yes. I know that something else that you talk about is the politics of love. Let's talk about that. I mean, you've written books on love. Love is the answer to everything. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think everything you and I have been talking about is the politics of love. When we're talking about those kids from Latin America and we talk about what their parents are having to go through and being forced to live in the shadows. What is politics of love? More enlightened immigration policies. When you talk about kids in schools who don't even have the resources to learn to read. I was reading an article once that 1/4 of the girls in the public school system in Chicago would be clinically diagnosed with PTSD. But remember, these kids, it's not just past, post-traumatic stress. It's present traumatic stress. It is triggered every day. What is a politics of love? What I have in my agenda, which is a Department of Children and Youth, a moving of our resources to the lives of children 10 years and younger, and a goal within 10 years of every public school in America being an absolute palace of learning and culture and the arts. What is a politics of love? A politics of love is standing up to Monsanto. A politics of love is cutting the defense budget. A politics of love is establishing a Department of Peace. A politics of love is a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. A politics of love is a just transition from a war economy to a peace economy. A politics of love is collectively applying the same principles of ethics and just basic human decency that we seek to apply to our own individual lives.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are mothers, right? So what do you seek, you and your husband? What do you want to do? You want to provide a safe home for your baby. You want him to be nurtured. You want him to be well-fed and well-educated. But the love that will save the world at this time cannot just be love for our own children. It has to also be love for the kids on the other side of town. It also has to be love for kids on the other side of the world, or our own kids will not be safe.
That is so true. And having a child of my own has made me, makes me realize you see every little baby, little kid in the world, and all they deserve is love, freedom, the best chance to live the life of their dreams.
Can you imagine if you and your husband and little boy were faced with a situation where violence and horror filled your environment to such an extent that you and your husband said, let's take Atticus, let's walk to South America where maybe we could get a job as a busboy.
I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine at all. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And once you know, you can't not know. Once you see, you can't not see. And I think so much of, you said something a few minutes ago about how I didn't want to know. I think there are things, and this is definitely an issue of personal transformation, because this applies to our private lives as much as to our collective. I don't even want to look.
Yeah.
Because if I look, it might be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But then you look and you go, oh, now I'm free.
Mm-hmm.
I'm free because once I look at it, I can start talking about solutions. Then I can get into the solution. But if I just hold the problem at bay and won't allow myself to look at it, then...
Yeah. Yeah, and that is like personal work as well. I mean, looking at your own shadow.
And
we all have
nation's
the
shadow.
dark and the light.
Yeah, and just like in personal work, they say you can't do a spiritual bypass.
Mm-hmm.
Neither can a country.
Yeah. Wow. That is very powerful. Oh my goodness. I love that. I love thinking of it that way.
Thank you.
The next thing I wanted to ask you a little more back toward what you were talking about in the beginning, because I know we have a lot of people listening who love A Course in Miracles. Mm-hmm. How would you recommend getting started with the Course in Miracles?
Well, there are 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
There's the text, which is volume 1. There's the workbook for students, which is volume 2. And then there's something called Manual for Teachers, which is volume 3. There's nothing in the course that says which book to read first.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever you read it from the beginning. When I first read, so the text is the intellectual basis of the course. It's over 600 pages. It's very dense. The workbook is 365 days of exercises. And the course says the workbook trains your mind to think along the lines that the text sets forth. So I might understand sort of the metaphysics of forgiveness from reading the text, but if I actually do the workbook exercise that day, that's how it sort of enters your deep subconscious as you do that meditation exercise. When I first did the course, I read the text and the workbook simultaneously. But that's not to say that that's a quote-unquote right way to do it. That was the right way to do it for me because I felt the text was explaining to me why I was doing the workbook, and the workbook was making the text real for me. Mm-hmm. And then the 3rd volume answers just questions that you have. But the course does say at the beginning that read it from the beginning because it is a very well-established curriculum. Otherwise, there's something in the course that says if you go to the end too fast, skip pages, it says something about how the material could become more traumatic than beatific.
Oh, wow.
You got to really follow the curriculum. Now, books like mine, Return to Love, I think of it as the Cliff Notes of the course. It's very simple. And some people find it helpful because it is very dense material. And I'll tell you something interesting. I think of myself as a popularizer. I think of myself doing with politics exactly what I did with A Course in Miracles. Mm-hmm. That's sort of my thing. I read really dense, and then I come back to you and I say, so let me tell you, this is what it's actually saying.
You're like a translator.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that what I've learned from my work in the spiritual world is that, okay, I read all the material. Let me make this clear.
Yeah.
And then people then start reading the deeper material too. But I feel that I'm sort of playing the same role.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good way to put it. A return to love is the Cliff Notes. I mean, that's how I view it, to A Course in Miracles.
Not a substitute for the course.
No, but it's so much easier to get through and to understand.
Thank you.
Yes. What's your favorite book you've ever written?
I wrote a book called Enchanted Love. That is my least commercially successful book. But it's sort of my heart's favorite. Whenever somebody comes up to me and says, my favorite of all your books is Enchanted Love, I feel a real special bond with that person because the world didn't want it. But if you like Enchanted Love, it's about the romantic mysteries of intimate love and I don't know, that book was writing. You have not had your second child yet, and I haven't. I only have one child, but I know obviously that when you have different children, you love them all in a different way, and that's how I feel about my books. Every book I wrote was written from the passion of that time and that moment, and then a book, like a child, goes out into the world and has their own life and their own relationships. And I just feel honored to have written them all. But some of them, I did that. That has its own life. And
Yeah, I totally understand. And what does your daily spiritual practice look like?
A Course in Miracles. I also do transcendental meditation, but I'm not consistent on a daily basis with TM. But A Course in Miracles workbook the Course in Miracles says 5 minutes with the Holy Spirit in the morning guarantees he will be in charge of your thought forms throughout the day.
Wow.
Preparing, and I think the Course in Miracles doesn't have any monopoly on truth. There are many different systems, religious, I believe there's one truth spoken in many different ways. But modernity is an assault on the nervous system. You and I have been talking about toxins in food. There's just toxins in the thinking. I mean,
yes.
It just every nobody has any impulse control right now. It's like we're just being assaulted. Grounding yourself. If you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is go to social media, the first thing you do is your nervous system, you hardly have a chance. It's like, don't be surprised that you're depressed by noon. So grounding ourselves is kind of like taking a shower. You don't want to take yesterday's dirt into the day on your body. But if we don't meditate or pray or do something that really grounds us spiritually in the morning, you're taking yesterday's stress into the day. And not only that, if you go right to social media, you're taking the stress of people all over the world. People in Vermont were in the flood, or people in whomever, or wherever. So there's nothing more important than aligning yourself with what is more deeply true than what's going on in this world in the morning. Then you're ready to go out into the world and be at cause of a greater light within it rather than at the effect of all of its darkness.
Yeah, that's amazing. And 5 minutes is very doable for all of us.
Well, it's so interesting, people who say they don't have time to meditate. And also I want to say something else about, since you have a little boy.
Yes.
And I learned this when I was a young mother, and I don't know if you've seen it yet, but little children, if you raise your little kids, sometimes people say to me, "Oh, Marianne, I want to meditate, but I have kids." It's amazing. If you really raise your children with this, okay, now we're going to have really quiet time with God.
Yes.
Now, Attica's at 1.5, a little boy, I don't know. There'll come a time, 3 or 4, okay, we're going to have very quiet time, and we're just going to be quiet with God. Children have a natural, okay.
That's so beautiful.
I always say, get this stuff into your kids. My daughter this morning, as a matter of fact, she sent me a little video. They were on their way to baby yoga. Baby yoga.
It's the
baby
best.
yoga.
Atticus and I did a lot of baby yoga before he started crawling and then walking. Otherwise,
not interested.
Yoga was just chasing him around. But he knows how to do yoga with me. He does down dog. He does child's pose.
Yeah, exactly.
If I'm doing yoga, he charges my yoga mat, gets on my foam roller.
Right.
It's so cute. I love that your daughter's doing that.
Take a lot of video.
Sweet little granddaughter. Oh my God, so many. I was just showing them. I have 150,000 photos on my phone. It's a lot, and I'm never going to stop.
You'll show them at his wedding rehearsal.
Yes, I will. So I want to ask you some of the rapid fire questions that I ask everyone who comes on.
Okay.
If you could be in a room with 3 people, living or dead, who would they be?
Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Jesus.
Amazing. That is a good room.
Yeah, quite a dinner.
Yes. And who are your mentors?
My mentors are, there are 2 layers of mentorship. One, I mentioned a woman earlier, Alma Wilson, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Oklahoma, and she was also a very religious Christian Scientist. She was a mentor on a certain level, and I certainly have had those. But one of the things I notice is on any given day, someone might be a mentor. I was dropped off here today by my friend Catherine Woodward Thomas, who you might have heard of. She wrote the book Calling in the One. And you can't priest yourself. I can't Marianne Williamson.
It's so true.
And she was coaching me on some things this morning. She was just giving me wisdom that I needed to hear, helping me realign my thoughts about some things. So this morning, she was my mentor.
Yeah.
It's on any given day. If you're really open, the whole notion metaphysically is that everything you need is right there. And one of the ways we don't receive what we need is that we're not open to listening to people. But if you are open to listening to people, first of all, none of us have a monopoly on the truth. But secondly, also, when it's you, we all have blind spots or things that we might know, but it's hard to apply them to our own triggers or our own blind spots. And so on any given day, you get wisdom sometimes from unexpected places.
Yeah, it's so true. I love that. Do you know your sun, rising, and moon signs?
Cancer, Gemini rising, Capricorn moon.
Oh, wow. What a combo. I totally see that for you, by the way. Capricorn moon.
Well, Capricorn moon is not a good moon sign for a woman. It's kind of cold.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
I appear stern when I'm really feeling, I'm a Cancer, and I'm feeling very sensitive. But,
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like if somebody will say, why are you frowning? I'm not frowning. I'm just sitting there. I'm just thinking.
Resting face.
So I think that's kind of, but I understand about astrology that there's no good or bad. There's the lessons to be
Absolutely.
learned. The evolved of every sign, the primitive of every sign.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I find it fascinating.
And do you know your human design?
I did it once. Somebody gave me a reading, but to me it was kind of, I just find astrology juicier. So I didn't really retain what I learned in human design.
That makes sense. Do you remember what you were? Like maybe a generator?
I don't remember. I did have a reading.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable. There's a lot of things to try to remember in this life, and human design can be a little complicated.
Yeah, it was complicated.
Oh, I'm just curious. And if you were a color, what color best represents your energy?
A deep wine color.
Ooh, beautiful. I totally see that. Wow. And where can everyone find you?
Oh, thank you. Well, at Marianne2024.com. And if anybody does want to see this energy and this message in the political realm, I hope they will give to the campaign, volunteer, sign up to volunteer for the campaign. Look at the website, once again, Marianne2024.com, and see what might be of interest to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
This was so much for having me.
Such an amazing conversation. You taught us so much, and we'll be rooting for you. Very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.